housing's very intriguing because, and it probably started when Lowell Williams, who I studied under, kind of opened my eyes to what's going on here. Because think about it this way. If you're the Apostle Paul and you're writing a letter and now you're going to close, and this is your chance to say the things that didn't fit in the rest of the book, the personal remarks. This is like pulling back a curtain and seeing sometime inside the life of Paul and inside the life of people that he's around. And it's more personal in its nature. So it's very intriguing to me what he has to say and what you can learn from it. And so that's what we'll do as we look at this section today. And actually, you could say that the whole section started in verse 1, but really that was instructions about giving. And so we'll just review that quickly so we can make sure we're all okay on that. Because chapter 16 is about the collection for the needy saints at Jerusalem. And then this closing remarks. Remember, we ended with this last week. We're all called to give, aren't we? Individually, on this side, we all have responsibility to share and take care of ourselves, our immediate family, needy brethren, needy people without in the world. But also, the church has a responsibility to take care of its own, the evangelists, other evangelists, just the facilities. And so when you take all those needs and you put them over here on the right, how are those needs going to be met? One thing is required to meet them. Money. And so you're ahead of me, Marvin. But so the question is, where is this money going to come from? We know they have authority for a treasury. We've seen that. But where does the Bible describe how you fund that treasury? And we saw, and we can learn if we did an extensive study, the only example that is given to us is the church received its funds by free will offerings. And that's why when a lot of people talk about tithing, they don't understand tithing is not commanded in the New Testament at all. Obviously, it's not commanded in this text, 1 Corinthians 16. Tithing was a command given to the children of Israel, and usually it wasn't even money. It was actually the fruits and the harvest of their crops. They didn't give money, they gave material things. And so tithing is never commanded as Christians, yet you hear people talk about it all. Bring your tithes, 10%. They don't understand, and it's not commanded. It's not in the New Testament at all. You say, well, how do we give? Free will offering. Now, we'll talk more about that when we get to chapter 8 and 9 of 2 Corinthians, where you say, well, how much? And what do you mean free will? Well, it has to be from the heart as you have prospered and generously. And if you can't do it generously and willfully, what would be the answer? Don't give, okay? And so that's how it's done, just by people just giving of what they have been given to by God. The church is never in a for-profit business. It never has bake sales. It never, if it can't do the work by the offerings of the people, then I guess the work doesn't get done. And it's just really that simple, all right? And so we could spend a lot of time talking about it, but here's our summary. Each church has financial responsibilities that have to be met. True? You know, even if we don't have a building, which they didn't, it's taking care of the needy brethren, Acts 6, the widows in the church, you know, supporting the evangelists, as Paul spent all chapter 9 talking about. 1 Corinthians 16 does give us an apostolic example or authority for a treasury and how to fund it. Now, notice what I did not say. What did I say? Not say. 1 Corinthians 16 is not a command to us, all right? And good, you all remember that. But it does give us authority of how we can fund a treasury, which we're given authority for, all right? And again, so we can use that example for ourselves today, all right? And so I'm going to slip right through that unless there's some questions about that. Yes, Heather. Well, that again, obligation is just below commandment. Well, here is the obligation. That's why I spent all that time on that chart. Anyone Christian say, well, good, if 1 Corinthians 16 is not a command to me, then I don't have to give ever. No, you got to somehow meet the needs of the congregation. You're commanded to. The question is, how are you going to do it then? Well, the example of how to do it is a free will offering. So we're back in the same place. We just got there a different way. Do you understand? So I'm glad you clarified that by asking that question. All right? Did you understand what she was asking? Yeah. All right. Okay, good. Anything else? So now we're in this section where we're looking at his closing remarks. All right? And I want to take you back all the way to chapter 15. Okay, it's like 6 verses back. In verse 58. The last verse of chapter 15. Paul spent all this time talking about the resurrection. And if there is no resurrection, we're wasting our time. Your faith is vain. We're to be most pitied. We have a dead Savior. There's no hope. But since we know that there is a resurrection, and he's coming again, and we're going to be transformed and given a spiritual body, we're going to be with him forever, it's the most exciting thing in the world because that's what we live for on this earth. So he has a conclusion, a summation really of a purpose statement of your life. And it's in verse 58. Therefore, my beloved brethren, he says, be steadfast. That's immovable. And here it is, always abounding in the work of the Lord. Now that word abounding, if you look it up, it means over the top. And people say, well, I'm glad you're exercising, but don't overdo it. Well, this word, if you understand it correctly, it means overdoing it. You know, it's just going crazy. You know, it's filling up to the fullest measure, so it's pouring out over. So you get this idea when it comes to the work of the Lord, when is too much work too much? I mean, when is it too much? The answer is never, because this is what it's all about, because everything else is vain. It only has short-term profit, if that, but this has eternal profit. This will have eternal consequences. So he says, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing your toil's not in vain in the Lord. So we have this work of the Lord, and we talked about this verse, and the question came out, and we had questions. What is the work of the Lord? And I said, we'll talk about some of it later. Well, we're going to here in these personal remarks. Because really what we see here is, in chapter 16, a series of discussions about the work of the Lord as seen in different people. First of all, the Christians locally, what are they supposed to do? Give. Is that a work of the Lord? Because they're taking care of needy saints, of people they don't even know. They live all the way where? In Judea, right? And they don't know them, but they know Christianity came from the Jews first. The apostles came out of Jerusalem. And because of their love and their gratefulness, what are they doing? They're giving back benevolent support to take care of them. And that is a work of the Lord. It's showing grace and love for people that you don't even know. So now we're going to look at some other instances of people that are bounding in the work of the Lord. We're going to look at Paul's travel plans and with some of the people that he's with. We're going to look at this section where he says, act like men. We're going to look at some guy that's addicted to service, which I think is very interesting. And another fellow that goes around refreshing spirits. That's an interesting service too. And then some closing greetings. So we've got a lot to look at. And each one of these could be a lesson in themselves. But notice what he says now in chapter 16 in verse 5. But I shall come to you after I go through Macedonia, for I'm going through Macedonia, and perhaps I shall stay with you, or even spend the winter, that you may send me on my way to wherever I may go. Because I do not wish to see you just in passing, for I hope to remain with you for some time, if the Lord permits. But I will remain in Ephesus until Pentecost, for a wide door for an effective service has opened to me, and there are many adversaries. So now Paul is giving them his travel plans. Do you see that? I'm going to come to you. but it's not going to be for a while. And when I do come, I don't want to just be there and have to go quickly. I want to spend some time with you. And the reason I'm not coming now is because something's going on down here in Ephesus. He's in Asia. And I'm committed to this work of service, and I'm not going to leave. So here I want to suggest several things. If you want to abound in the work of the Lord, you have to have a plan. You have to have a vision. Does Paul have a plan? Does he have things mapped out, what he's going to do and how he intends to do them? He says, I'm not coming even to you directly. I'm going to go through Macedonia, because he's going to collect some funds there as well and encourage the brethren. But I'm not even going there until I'm done here. And say, well, Paul, why don't you leave now? Because there's an effective work. A wide door is open, but there's a lot of people that are trying to stop it. So not only do we see that if you want to abound in the work of the Lord, you have to have a plan, a vision. And that couples with a passion. He's passionate about it. Then also you got to be flexible. Is Paul being flexible here? Because, he wants to come, but he's telling them, I'm not coming now. And then we're going to look in 1 Corinthians later, he's going to have to explain why he didn't get there when he thought he was going to get there. It's because it's all if the Lord permits. Does the Lord have his own will when it comes to our plans? Right. I was watching these strongest man in the world competition. Is that what it's called? And they're pulling a 50-ton bus, with a rope. Okay? Have you ever tried to steer a bus or something like that when it's sitting? Yeah, when it's sitting still. Is it hard to turn the wheel? Now, what if you start it up and you start rolling? Does it steer a little easier? So, Heather, what have I always told you? God can't steer a parked car. But if you have plans and you have a vision, I'm going to serve the Lord. I'm going to do something. He can direct you. He can say, no, you're going to go there later. Or you're not going to go there at all. But we have to make plans to allow him to steer our lives. Because we're just waiting for him to just move us and tell us it's not going to happen. A lot of people are just waiting. Actually, they're just sitting doing nothing. That's not abounding in the work of the Lord. So he says, I'm going to come through Macedonia. And I'll spend the winter. So that's another thing. It's interesting here. Great works don't happen in the short term. And sometimes we like to fly in, just do our thing and then fly out and say, well, good, you're on your own. Is that Paul's attitude here? No. So I want to spend the whole winter with you. Now, has he really given them a lot of things to think about in this letter? Has he been really firm and harsh with them? Yes. And he has some enemies there in Corinth. And he says later, I'll deal with them if you don't correct things, And so he doesn't want to just fly in and fly out. He wants to spend some quality time with them. And it takes that. If you want to abound in the work of the Lord, and if it has to do with relationships or working with a person, it takes time. And that's what Paul understands here. All right, so when we look at the word, I hope you to send me on my way, that word actually means to escort, to aid in travel. It's in other words, I hope when I get there that you will help me, perhaps financially, on my way in the rest of my journey. So they're going to be partners with him in this work of the Lord. You see that? So here's another way. You might not be physically going, but can you financially support the work of the Lord? Yes. And that's what they're doing here. And that's what Paul's asking them to do. So here he is at Ephesus, and Achaia is this area where Corinth is. And so Paul's going to go all the way up into Macedonia area, and I identified the church at Philippi, but there's the church at Thessalonica and Berea. So no doubt he's going to see all those congregations, get all the way down to Corinth and spend the winter. Now, we'll learn later in 2 Corinthians, he didn't make it like planned. And he does get there, but he doesn't make it as he planned, all right? And so he's talking about these travel plans, but he says, the reason I'm not coming now, there's this wide door for an effective service. Now, when you think of a wide door, what does that represent to you? What does a door represent? opportunity, and when a door's closed, there's no access, right? But when a door's open, you have access to something you did not have opportunity before. So physically, it's an open door, but metaphorically, he's talking about this is a great opportunity. And so let's talk about this idea of an open door. He talked about it on his first missionary journey when he reports back to the church at Antioch, and he says, God had opened up to us a door of faith to the Gentiles. He had magnificent success. And you can look back in Acts 13 and 14. The whole city is gathered at his door. Who does he give credit to? God. Now, Paul did the work. He did the driving, but who's directing him in all this? And the hardest thing to do is to find someone with a good heart that'll listen to the scripture. And Paul says, when it's all said and done, who opened the door to these people's hearts for the gospel? That's amazing. If you want to share the gospel, and we're all called to do it in our own family and our friends and associates, and you're passionate about it, will God give you the opportunity? If he senses in you that you're prepared and you're willing and you really want to do it. Well, that's what happens here. And so we see the same thing. Look with me in Romans 15, what he says there. The last chapter of 16, so we're in chapter 15 in verse 22. For this reason, he says, I've been often hindered coming to you. See, Paul wanted to get to Spain. He talks about it a lot. But now, with no further place for me in these regions, and since I have had for many years a longing to come to you, whenever I go to Spain, I hope to see you in passing and be helped by you on my way there by you. And when I first enjoyed your company for a while, but now I'm going to Jerusalem serving the saints. What's he alluding to? Yeah, going up to Macedonia after he's been through Galatia, down to Achaia, Corinth, collecting all this money and going to Jerusalem. So he's telling them, I can't get there until I do this work of service. Verse 26, for Macedonia and Achaia has been pleased to make a contribution for the poor among the saints in Jerusalem. And they're pleased to do so, and they're indebted to them. For if the Gentiles have shared in their spiritual things, they're indebted to minister to them also in the material things. And when I have finished this and put my seal on the fruit of theirs, I will go on by way of you to Spain. And I know when I come to you, I will come in the fullness of the blessing of Christ. Isn't that beautiful? It says, I'm not going on my time plan. I'm doing the Lord's work. I'm abounding in it. And when I do get there, who's going to bless me in doing it? Jesus Christ. With his endorsement, his blessing, his seal of approval, and it'd be the right time to go. And right now he's saying what? It's not the right time to go. Question, did he go with the blessing of Christ when he got there? That's his confidence. Did God direct all that? Question, how did he get to Rome? As a slave. Now, isn't that fascinating? He had all the confidence that he's going to submit to the will of the Lord and go when the Lord wants him to go with the Lord's blessing. The Lord said, okay, it's time to go, Paul. You're going as a slave. Is that the way he planned it? Is that the way you plan your life? And you might feel like you're trapped and you're doing things and you're just like, my life's not my own. This is not the way I figured my life would be. I thought I'd be free and everything be blessed and hunky-dory. But sometimes that's not the way God plans your life to be. Now, where is he when he writes the Corinthian letter? At Ephesus, right? And what does he say? There's many adversaries. One person said, if you're serving without adversaries or opposition, perhaps you're serving in the wrong place. Because it seems like the greater the opportunity, the greater the opposition. Because God who opens the door, who's there trying to slam it shut? Satan. And Paul will refer to that when he talks about Satan, how he's hindered him. We're not going to look at this verse. Wrong. Well, let's look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. 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 1 Thessalonians chapter In verse 17 and 18, brethren, we've been bereft of you for a short while in person and not in spirit. For we were more eager with great desire to see your face. And we wanted to come to you. I, Paul, more than once. And what does he say? Satan thwarted us. Now, I don't understand exactly how Satan does that, but is Paul correct in saying that Satan can oppose you so much he can hinder you from doing what you plan to do? Isn't that what he's saying happened? Now, does that mean you just roll over and quit? No. So another thing, if you want to abound in the work, you have to have a plan. You have to have a vision. You got to be flexible, but you also have to be committed. Because there's going to be opposition, and sometimes it's so overwhelming, you feel like you're enslaved to the events around you. You're not in charge at all, and that's when Satan's going to get you to quit. But when we abound and we're over the top, we overdo it, we never quit. We're committed. It doesn't matter how hard it gets and how low my spirits are. I know if the Lord's with me, what can man do to me? And the answer is what? Nothing. And so that's what we're going to see happening. So in Acts chapter 19, we see at Ephesus there was a great work. And when we read that, he says that he studied in the school of Tyrannus with these few disciples for 2.5 years, teaching daily. And does anyone remember the result of teaching daily in one place for 2.5 years? What does the next verse say? All of Asia heard the word. Now again, I got to remind you, you can look it up. Chapter 19 in verse 1 through 10. Paul's in one place every day teaching a small group of disciples for 2.5 years. And it says, all of Asia heard the word. That's a great door, isn't it? And that's because people, being the economic center and a place of learning like Ephesus was, it was an educational center as well. People are always coming there. And what happens when they come there? They bump into Christians. They get taught. And what do? Home. And then they spread the gospel when they go home. Paul says, I've never seen anything like it. But it's teaching God's word in one place, committed. Now, it was so bad. We'll read in 2 Corinthians, he says, this adversary, and we're not sure exactly what he's talking about, but we'll read it later. We're not going to spend the time now. He says, we despaired for our life. We thought we were going to die. And he says, we understand now because we were being taught not to trust in ourselves, but trust in the Lord. Now, when things are going well and you're having great success, what do we tend to start doing? Trusting in ourselves, like, hey, man, I'm all that. I got it together. Look what I'm doing. But when there's great opposition and you're afraid you might even die, what does that force you to do? Paul says it taught us to trust in the Lord. Huh? Help. Yeah, help. Help. I don't know how we're getting out of this. And he said, he delivered us. And that's why, again, if you want to abound in the work of the Lord, there's going to be opposition. The more you want to work, then probably the more opposition there'll be. I mean, not constant always, but Satan's going to fight back. And probably the neatest thing is you'll stop trusting yourself, you'll start trusting him, you'll see God work in your life. And that'll be just even more inspiring because you realize you're not alone. All right. So now let's move to Timothy, more travel plans. He says, if Timothy. Now, it's not if. It's interesting because Timothy is the one's perhaps carrying this letter to the Corinthians. Timothy has been a companion of Paul. And he says, when he comes to you, I want him to be with you without cause to be afraid. For he is doing what? Oh, here's this whole theme. What's Timothy doing? The Lord's work. And what is he doing? He's carrying this letter. And he also is going to encourage them and spend time with them. All right? He's doing the Lord's work. And I don't want him to be afraid. Now, why would he have reason to be afraid? It's not a gracious letter. And so they might take out their resentment or bitterness on Timothy. Right? The bearer of the news. That's right. Hey, I'm just the messenger, all right? But he says, let no one despise him. Does anyone remember where that word is found elsewhere? Very good, Eva. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 12. Let no one despise your youth, but you be an example in all conduct, speech, and love of a believer. In other words, you don't give them a reason to despise you. Because you're preaching a perfect gospel, Timothy. You're a young man. And so you live it so they don't dismiss what you say because they look at your actions. So if you want to be committed and over the top when it comes to the work of the Lord, live it yourself to start with. It starts right here. Example in speech, in conduct, in faith, and he says in love. But he says, you don't despise him because he is younger. He is my child in the faith. You don't reject him. But I want to hear that he went away with peace. You sent him away. Guess that word is? The same word that we saw earlier. Paul says, I hope when I get there, you'll send me away. Support me. I hope when he gets there, you'll treat him with the same courtesy that you're going to treat me, and you're going to financially help him along his way. Wow, powerful. That's how you abound in the work of the Lord. People come, you might not be able to go, but you can help them go. And this congregation still is involved. When I go to the Philippines, you're all involved in that work. You're helping send me along the way, as well as Dave. And you say, well, I don't get to go, but you're helping send us along the way. That's abounding in the work of the Lord. Indirectly, but it is having a part of that effort, all right? Because I want him to come to me, and I expect him with the brethren. Is Paul concerned about Timothy? Yeah, he is, all right? He's his child in the faith. He calls him my true son in the faith because he kind of birthed him spiritually. He's been with him all this time. Paul loves Timothy, and so you can hear his compassion and his concern for him come out here, can't you? And that's another thing to learn. In the church and as brethren, we develop those kind of ties, don't we? That our spiritual brethren and sisters become more connected to us than our physical ones. All right. The word despise is used of Jesus, by the way, when they despised him, when they mocked him. They thought him just of no account. That's how they rejected him. And Paul's concerned that they're going to treat Timothy with the same type of contempt. Let me ask you this. Will people in the world regard you as nothing as a Christian? Yeah. And we want to be respected. We want to be well thought of. But if they regarded Jesus with contempt as worth nothing, will they regard us similarly? Yes. And if we're more concerned about getting the approval of man rather than the approval of God, we'll never be able to abound in the work of the Lord. So we have to make a decision. What's more important? Things that last eternal or things that are just very temporal? If you want to abound, you have to have that type of disposition. So then he mentions Apollos. What do we know about Apollos? Someone help me. An eloquent speaker. Where was he originally when we were introduced to him? Ephesus, where Paul is now. Who pulled him aside? Aquila and Priscilla, and taught him the way of the Lord more accurately. Where did Apollos go after they were done with him? Corinth. So they know Apollos, don't they? They have a relationship with him. And Paul followed Apollos at Ephesus, and he had to fix some of the situation. They baptized some people that were baptized in the baptism of John. But Apollos has been down to Corinth, and they know he is. And he says, I encourage Apollos greatly to come to you with the brethren. And it was not his desire to come now, but he'll come when he has opportunity. Now, what does that tell you about Paul, the apostle, and his relationship with Apollos, a non-apostle? What does that tell you? He's training him, perhaps. Does he pull weight? Does he pull rank? Because that's what I'm trying to ask.
Apollos pulls weight with Paul rather than
Thank you. You asked it better than I did. He doesn't pull rank and say, hey, I'm the apostle, you're going. There's this teamwork. And you see that? And you might expect Paul to pull rank and say, listen, I want you to go. But that doesn't happen. There's a hierarchy in the church sometimes seem to develop between preachers and people and elders and one person trying to lord himself over others or even other congregations. Didn't happen here. There's a spirit of community and teamwork. And Paul, with all his position, doesn't command him to go. Did he greatly encourage him? That's what it says. But for some reason, Apollos was tending to something else and it wasn't the right time. So this is very interesting. Could Paul go to Corinth right now? No, because he's committed to a wide door with many adversaries. And so Apollos is in a similar situation. And then I learned something here. I can't expect you to do what I'm doing because you're in a different position in life right now, right? And likewise, can you expect me to do what you're doing when I'm in a different role and circumstances in life? Everyone has their own work of the Lord, and we can't expect everyone to be doing exactly what we want them to do as long as they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. You understand what I'm saying? And so not everyone can go. Paul couldn't go. And he said what? No, not now. I'll go later. Okay? Interesting. Yes?
Yeah, that's the point that really sticks out to me, and it was not at all his desire to come now.
Yeah.
But he will come when he has opportunity, which shows very clearly Paul didn't say, you need to go now.
Right. When he says he will come, where did Paul get that from? From Apollos. Yeah. Apollos expresses, I really want to go, but not now. Not now. I will later. Okay? When the dust settles. Okay? And that's okay. Now let's talk about this verse, 13 and 14. This verse is just like thrown in there. And it's like Paul says, I just got to say this to you guys. And it's almost the words of a commander of a battalion telling his soldiers, militarily, we got to fight. And there's like 3 strong statements, actually 4. And then it's all softened with the last statement, let everything be done in love. So what are you talking about? Verse 13 and 14. Maybe you've heard some wonderful sermons just on this, and it's worthy of it. He says, be on the alert. Everything's really short. It's like, boom, stand firm in the faith. Boom, act like men. Boom, then what? Be strong. Boom. Can you hear just the rally of the troops? And that's, who's this directed to? The Corinthians and his beloved brethren, which he's already addressed them, showing his affection for them. So all these words, the word alert means literally, be awake. Now, why would he say that? Be awake. It's like, be on guard. Watch out. Well, think back on the letter. If we're going to rehearse it all, were the things they had to watch out for. He said, flee immorality. He said, flee idolatry. They're all messed up in their Lord's Supper and all what they're doing. They're plagued with this idolatry. He said, flee these things. The eating the meats and their liberties and suing each other and immorality in the church. He says, wake up, be on guard. Satan is trying to take us out all the time. Then what does he say? Stand firm. That means stand fast, stationary, immovable. Boy, is that quite a statement if you want to bound in the work of the Lord? I'm like a tree and I will not be moved. You can assail me, Satan. You can blow as hard as you want, but I'm not moving. That's what it means, standing firm in the faith. Then the next one, somebody might think it's sexist, but he says, well, be strong. Did I skip one there? Act like men. There it is. Out of order. It comes from the word, actually, that you get mail from. And the best understanding when he says act like men, when he says act like men, it's just sort of like when we say, God, all man will we might say all men or all mankind. It's generic for both male and female. Isn't that the way the Bible talks? It uses the word man to include both sexes. Today, we have to be so politically correct. We have to say he, she, or they, or let all of us. And we try to abstain using just man to refer to all sexes. So you're not a post-man, you're a post-person, right? And I understand all that. But Paul's not being sexist, is what I'm trying to say. When he says, act like men, what is he saying then? He says, sometimes you just got to be strong. You got to be courageous. You got to be brave. I mean, when you're a child, that's one thing to run. But when you become an adult, there's a time to stand and be brave. I saw this, and I think it helps. So here's a mother lion teaching her cubs. Now, what do little cubs do? You ever watch them? They love to play and wrestle and all that. But is there time the little cubs got to grow up? So the mother's teaching them, keep your eyes open. Do they have to be on the alert all the time? Yeah, or else they'll be devoured. He says, hold tight to your convictions. And then give it all you've got. Be strong. Be resolute. Then it says love without stopping. But basically he said, you got to act like what? Lions. Why do you got to act like lions? Because that's what you are. You're lions. Act like it. And that's what he's saying as Christians. He says, act like one. Grow up. Be strong. Be courageous. And we need that kind of encouragement, don't we? It's like a coach giving a pep talk before the football team goes out on the field. We can win. Fight, And you need that. Everyone's going, yeah. And it's not just a male thing. We all need to hear that. And Paul's doing that kind of talk here. Then it's tempered with, what does he say? What's it tempered with? Make sure you're not doing it for the wrong reason. You're not doing it for your own self-glory, not for your own self-satisfaction. You're doing it for love. Because I love these souls so desperately, I want them to be in heaven with God. Just like he loved me enough to make sure I got there. And if you have that attitude, everything else is okay. All the motives will be okay. But love has to temper it all. Can you be bold and strong and still be loving? Do we get this idea that love has to be timid and kind of quiet and weak? Do we get that idea from our culture today? That if you say anything about anything that something's right or wrong, oh, you're not very loving. So we got to refrain our words. We got to temper all our words. I understand all that. We have to. But can you call something truthfully evil or wrong and still be loving? Can you stand for truth and still be loving? Can you hold to your conviction and still be loving? Yes. That's why these two marry together so perfectly. He said, let's grow up and act like men. We've got enough wimps in the world. I'm talking about spiritually. Make sure you're men that love. That's the most courageous kind there is. And it took a lot of strength for Jesus to die on the cross, didn't it? Did he act like a man? He held everything back to allow them to do what they did to him. I don't know. That's a great sermon itself. All right? Act like lions. No, act like Christians. Then this one, verse 15 and 16. This one deserves a lot of time, but we're just going to go over it just real quickly. I urge you, brethren, you know the household of Stephanas. Now, do we know who he is? We could run some references about him, but do the church of Corinth know who he is? Yes. They were the first fruits of Achaia, so they're some of the first Christians that were baptized and brought into the Christ church. And they've devoted themselves for ministry to the saints. You be in subjection to such men and to everyone who helps to the work and labors. What does the King James say, someone? What does he say about these people? What does the King James say? Wayne?
I'm going to give it to you, but I'm going to disagree with it.
Addicted. All right. Okay, go ahead and disagree with it. That's right.
That's not the word I would have used.
Well, and that's why no one else uses it other than the King James. But I like the word because it creates a picture in our eyes. Because we know what addicted is. but it's not a negative sense, but this is in a totally positive sense, all right? Literally the word is the word tasso in the Greek. It means to arrange yourself under, arrange your life, and so something, you know, you focus your whole life on one purpose, and what have they arranged and focused their whole life for? What does it say? Ministry, which is the word diakonos, which is the word we get deacon from. It's sometimes ministry or service. What are they all about? Stephanus and his household. All they want to do is service. What do they think constantly? How can I serve? How can I serve? How can I minister? They're addicted to it. That's why I like the word. But they're not literally addicted. But spiritually, that's all they want to do. Is that abounding in the work of the Lord? He says, you know it. Now, are there people you know in your life that you grew up, you're like, man, those people were addicted to service. That's all they did was serve the brethren. Did they have a title? Do these people, are they called deacons, deaconesses, apostles? What's he called? Stephanus, just by his given name. So Paul says, you know this guy, and what's his instruction to the church? What's his instruction? Be subject to this person and these people and anybody else that works like them. That word subject is the word hupotasso. Arrange yourself under them. It's the same word where we're used to submit to our husbands, and we're to submit to one another, and we're to submit to Christ. He says, you submit to them. Wow. Do they have authority? So what does it mean, submit to such people that are addicted to service? Oh, yeah, more than that. What would it mean? Huh? Support them. I mean, these people are so central and integral to the workings of the church and the work of the Lord that if you don't support them prayerfully, anything they ask of you, financially, whatever it is, the church would fall apart. You know those kind of people I'm talking about? Now, do they have an office? No, but can you support them? And that's what he's asking. Do you need an office to abound in the work of the Lord? A title, a position. Do you need one? These people didn't have them. It's all about a passion. I'm going to serve the Lord. I don't care how much opposition is there. I'm doing it for him. Isn't that beautiful? Yes.
Be in subordination to them and acknowledge them, as it says in 19.
Yes.
And I think that's what we're supposed to be doing today as a modern church. For example, Jack, I'm not picking on you, but we need to acknowledge the work that you do.
Well, that's true.
We need to acknowledge the work that the elders do.
That's right. When Jerry was running the VPS, was she addicted to service? Did we support her? And I know the elders would do. She'd come in, so I need this, and they'd go, oh, who's running the show? And we all knew the elders were, but she was. And they supported her, rightfully so. Were they still in charge? Yes, but you don't want to get in the way that someone that wants to serve. You know what I'm saying? You support them. And there's a lot of other people who could name just that way. That's abounding in the work of the Lord. And he said, anyone else that works and labors, anybody else, whether they have a title or not. And so, a couple more and we're done. This guy's Stephanus and Fortune. This guy had a lot of fortune in his life. A lot of fortune. And Achaeus, because they have supplied what was lacking on your part, that's probably financial. And I love this. They have refreshed my spirit. I'm going to go a little long, so bear with me, okay? I have to talk about this. Paul calls these people out in this specific person because he says, they have refreshed my spirit. That's a ministry. There's some people have this uncanny ability when they sense that you're maybe a little low on spiritual fuel, you're a little down, they have ability to lift you back up, to refresh you. Paul said, this guy, these people, they've refreshed me. They've lifted my spirits. Now, it's interesting. Here's a whole bunch of them. I said, I want to come to you and find refreshing rest in your company. There is a ministry of refreshing. Some people, when you see them come, you go, oh, no. They're not going to build you up. They're going to probably make you feel worse. Yeah, I know. I had a dog that died, too. And they just tell you all their problems, and you feel worse than when they got there. But other people, they have the opposite. He said, we rejoice even more for the joy of Titus because his spirit has been refreshed by you all. You can refresh a person. The Lord grant mercy to the house of Onesiphorus, for he's often refreshed me. He wasn't ashamed of my chains. Paul's calling these people out, and he said they got this unique ability, and that's the work of the Lord. If all they're doing is keeping a worker refreshed, invigorated. Is that a service? And then another one, Philemon said the saints had been refreshed through his servant. So we're done. The church is easy to greet you. Here's another work of service. I just commend everyone. Every time you see brethren on Wednesday, Sunday night, greet people. It shows what? Acceptance, brotherly love, that I acknowledge you, I recognize you. And when you ask how they're doing, they start to tell you, don't say, that's nice. Just listen. Just truly listen. And then if it's appropriate, just pray with them right then if you have to. He says, greet the church of Asia, greet you. Aquila and Priscilla greet you because they've been there. The church is in their house. That's interesting. All the brethren greet you. Greet one another, holy kiss. What do we see here? Greet, 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 greet. And then he says, the greeting, Paul says, I write this in my own hand. He had an eye problem. He used a scribe, but he'd sign off in his own large letters. So this is in his own writing in the original manuscript. If anyone does not love the Lord, he's to be accursed. That's the third degree of excommunication from the church or the household of Israel. And it's just like you're removed from the community. And he's using that language for someone that doesn't love the Lord. That's really strong, how serious it is. Maranatha, what does that mean? It's Aramaic for what? Lord, come. That's Paul's prayer. It's just, Lord, come. Settled into all the problems, won't it? And that should be our prayer. Lord, come, because then we get to go home. It's all over. We get to rest from our labors. May the grace of the Lord Jesus be with you. My love be with you all in Christ Jesus. Amen. Don't you love Paul? Isn't there a lot in his closing letters? It reveals so much about his spirit and about what the work of the Lord is. Let's don't read over them quickly next time. Let's ponder them seriously like we tried to now. All right, thank you.